So to get to the idea of the vertical, remember we're in a discovery space and we are trying to take things from a mystery state or a hypothesis. I have a question and I wanted to move it more towards some area where we have enough knowledge about it that we can move it from a heuristic state to a marketing state or a manufacturing state. So in this one case, you can imagine you have one target, you've identified a disease, you've identified something that you can build a drug against, and you need to discover that, and you don't really know exactly what it is, but you know the area. So you take these vertical shots. So basically, you go from a position of a problem, and there's a solution, and there's a vertical that goes straight up across that, and where you can imagine going from point A, which is you don't know, to point B, which is you do know. And in our case, we're going for this transformative innovation. So if we do this successfully, we'll have a solution that's transformative. So we'll have a best-in-class, first-in-class for the particular disease state we're going after. And you can imagine that at each step of the process, there's a lot of unknown. You're going from a position of most risky or most ignorant to a position where it's been de-risked or at least ignorant. And that's, again, moving through from mystery to heuristic. And basically, you can do these things, and management can approve these things. You can have money, you can have people, and you're going to go after this with a certain period of time. Now, lean can be applied to this because this is a process. And again, you have to define the process at the beginning, determine what this vertical is really all about, break the vertical into smaller parts. At each step of the way, have an iteration of questioning, iteration of improvement. How can we be more efficient, more an ability to understand at each step what is the probability of success when you move to the next step. Eventually, you de-risk this all the way up to the solution. And the big thing is that you could put all your money into one vertical. You could be, in essence, going for that transformative technology, and you're a single company. You could put up all your startup money into this one thing, and go for broke, right? And if you succeed, you do great. If you fail, you lose out. So one thing that you can do is part of the lean process is you can develop a new process where in and through this design strategy is we can use multiple verticals, so many vertical processes at once. Each of these processes are lower cost and in essence a lower risk. So you can have multiple verticals that go from a certain distance from the problem to the answer. So in regards to lean and a process that can look at this, and in the previous slide we talked about multiple verticals. Basically, we need to manage these verticals in a way that you would manage things in a manufacturing type mindset. You want to make sure that you optimize the system of verticals so that one, you extract and develop the value that's starting to develop in and through this process. So as I spoke before, let's just say you have, in this case, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 verticals. So let's say 8 groups of people going after the same type of question. They're following different aspects, going for different targets into different areas, and they're going to develop as a team their own way to move this thing forward. And over time, you can imagine, since we don't know what we're looking at, having more verticals than less increases our chances of success. And what you also be mindful of is which verticals are starting to get traction, starting to move forward more quickly, are giving insights that can be leveraged back onto the other verticals, and you can do this iterative improvement process. But what's also, there's a pull process involved in this, and that basically as verticals are moving forward and other ones are failing, basically the pull process is as something is succeeding that pulls away or pulls the decision to shut down solution verticals that are not working, in a sense, are relatively failing, and cause them to be removed from the grid. And that gives more resources that can circle back, or allow for verticals that are informing each other to allow that grouping to move forward. Also, it creates space where one can decide to move in new verticals back in, or you can obviously shrink the number of verticals due to the ones that are working, and funnel more resources into that. A lot of these things can be managed in many ways. In manufacturing, the plant is managed in and through lean. So it's really a pull system based on success within a vertical from a problem towards a solution, and allows for the efficient use of resources and time, and also from the learnings that are actively taking place day by day. In essence, what you know today is going to be different from what you know tomorrow, and therefore the vertical solution systems will be evolving. And again, all of these verticals are aimed at transformative discoveries, as we spoke about in the last slide. I want to add that within each of these verticals, having a good problems to surface process or procedure would be quite useful, allowing for the vertical to move forward more quickly, and that problems don't stay hidden, and the team can actually be aware of everything and try and use their best problem solving activities around these things as soon as possible. Another aspect is that the flow and the work on all verticals needs to be maintained even. You don't want to have too much being held up in one particular vertical, or any managerial aspects being taken up by any particular vertical over another. So an observation around flow within the vertical, and also a problem-solving mechanism to surface for each vertical. And then also you can imagine these things could be applied to the entire set of verticals, would allow for the whole system to work best. So here we have the graphic of the big picture again. So the process improvement area is between mystery and heuristics. You just saw how in that area we'll have a bunch of verticals going after solutions. And you can see that within that space, you want to be agile. If you think of all those different verticals, you want to be able to be flexible in which verticals you're going to keep or not keep. Are you going to keep them all going? How long you're going to keep them all going? Those that start to show success, how quickly do we remove verticals that are not, and meaning pushing the, it sounds funny, I'm pushing the pull system. Also, do we move new things in based on what we're learning every day? So you need to be agile, you need to be flexible, and again, in each vertical, the right process might be different for the team that's involved and for the angle that they're going after. Also, the right process can change within a given vertical depending on the stage of maturity the vertical is at, or the learnings that you're getting as you move through the vertical. And those things which are amenable to the 5S, obviously you want to have that in place. You want to have good sorting, good order. You don't want things to be clean that need to be clean. We want to have the appropriate standardization or standards, and those kinds of things need to be in place where it's appropriate. And again, as I described, really this whole process is always a continuous solving of root problems. And as problems are being solved, the verticals move forward, and we get closer to solutions. And the learnings institutionally and how they're going about doing this will give them an edge, will give them an ability to produce better drugs, things that will perhaps have a better probability of success through development, through clinical phase trials, and they can become a company that develops better drugs and becomes a better company. Again, all of this in creating multiple verticals, applying lean, applying 5S where it's appropriate, agile, all of the long-term philosophy considerations, the right process considerations, the reason we even came up with multiple verticals is to reduce waste. So you can imagine reducing waste is what will allow us to have a higher than 4% success rate and allow us to have a higher return on investment. And even if we're going after discovery space, where really what we're going after is an unknown fundamentally. And again, all of this is to facilitate the increased probability for success, right? So this will take time, obviously, and the pharmaceutical industry has been around for some time, but we are still having very poor success rates, and arguably, you can imagine that there's room to improve on the types of drugs we're capable of making. For simple purposes, we could say a drug that's more effective than it is right now, or something that has low tox profile, meaning it doesn't make you feel sick. It might cure your disease, but kind of makes you feel sick. I think the easiest example is chemotherapy. So you can imagine we could get better at what we develop, still have the effect you need to get better, but allowing it to be more effective and have no tox would be a great situation to be in. So we need to have an ability to increase our probability of success. Do this enough, and eventually you'll get there. So I want to sort of come to the last slide before the conclusions and state fundamentally, I would argue the most important lean principle would be development of people. Again, this particular principle is connected to all the other fundamental principles, but this one is in many cases somewhat overlooked, and not just in the pharmaceutical industry, but in all industries, because they are trying to extract value versus develop value, which is a concept for long term versus the short term. So you need to develop people in a pharmaceutical company, especially in discovery. I stated earlier that the best people are people who've been around for 20 years or more. This is a long time. This is almost 1/3 or 1/2 of someone's working career. This is outside of school even, okay? So due to the innate complexity of the disease, the therapeutic development towards a drug, people have to have a deep experience in what they do, and they also have to have a deep life experience. They have to be mature people to handle the types of stresses they're going to be put under. And dealing with the unknown is not fun, and it can be stressful, and it takes a certain type of person to handle it well. So the investment is needed to be there to make the working place good for deep thinkers, for people who want long-term traction. How do we keep these people engaged? How do we keep them interested? How do we keep them balanced and good problem solvers in the long term? Because the long-term investment really comes later on. This long-term payout from someone who can handle a whole lot of stuff comes out of someone who's been around for 20 years. Not someone who's been around for 5, not 10, but 20. So the continuous development of these deep thinkers' needs are also needed. And this is also part of the long-term philosophy, as I just said. So I can't understate of all things that one's going to do, you need to development of the people that are involved. And I mentioned a few other things before, which was, the right process with the right strategy, and then make sure the people are taken care of, and eventually things will start working for you as a company, for sure. So in conclusion, the discovery process is a process, and lean principles can be applied there. Most importantly, long-term philosophy is needed to make sustainable and transformative therapies. The right process can be tuned and evolved well with lean practices, problems to the surface, pull system, development of people long term. Continuously solving root problems will ensure better discovery platforms in its entirety over time. This is very important to ensure not only do companies sustainably develop new drugs, but make better drugs.